So we are very excited to have Kate with us today. So Kate is the Global Head of Responsible Business at Kennedy's Law. She sets the responsible business strategy with the aim of integrating responsible business across the firm. Kate leads a team that integrates the UN's SDGs into the operations and decision making. And Kate is going to talk to us about how to set strategies and make sure that those are linked to the very important sustainable development goals, which I'm going to let Kate introduce. So over to you. Thank you, Kate.
Thanks very much, Olivia, and hi everyone. Delighted to be here on a topic that I could probably spend an entire day talking about, but I'm not here just to rant on. The objectives for this session is to help you understand the SDGs in a business context. So how are businesses using the SDGs to inform their sustainability strategies, but also as much as possible, I'll try and weave in some practical tips and strategies that you could take away and deploy yourself. So it's great to see from the poll that we've just run, about half of you have already begun your business responsible business strategy, but not yet linked it to the SDGs. So hopefully this will be a useful session. So my journey with the SDGs began back in 2017, and so I've got a lot of experience of grappling with what this means. And I must admit, in the early days, there wasn't necessarily loads of practical things that businesses can take away, but actually this is an amazing time to be engaging with the SDGs. There is so much more out there to help businesses really understand how they can act on them. So I can share that with you as we go through. As Olivia mentioned, I'm a global law firm. We are across 76 offices, 2,500 people, and really a huge part of us sort of communicating and engaging people with what we're trying to do is using the SDGs. So it's been a very sort of significant part of my role in this role, and also when I was at another law firm where I led on quite a significant project to develop a SDG integration work stream for the firm. So let's kick off, shall we? The first thing I want to do, if you can go to the next slide, is talk about what the SDGs are. The SDGs effectively give you a plan of how to tackle the world's biggest issues. The UN did 30 years of homework to formulate this plan, and essentially they wanted to understand how they could make a better and more sustainable future for everyone. So they focus across the general themes of eradicating poverty, inequality and climate change, and doing this by 2030. So they were launched in 2015 with a 15-year agenda to achieve these goals by the year 2030. There's 17 goals, and as you can see on the slide, you can divvy them up in lots of different ways. They all link to each other. And you can see some that overlap. There'll be some areas where if you address one of those goals, you'll be impacting on another. So these 17 global goals were agreed by all 193 member states of the UN, including the UK government, with the commitment to use the SDGs to inform policy and funding going forwards. But it isn't just about governments. Businesses need to play their part. So you cannot run a prosperous business in a failing world. And that's the underlying principle of all of this. So the SDGs were an update from the Millennium Development Goals, which when the MDGs were around, they weren't necessarily geared up for businesses to be involved in contributing, but the SDGs absolutely are. So they were developed to ensure that whether you're a government, civil society, a business, private sector, or even an individual, there's something that you can do to support the plan. So we're at half time. There's at halfway point, there's been a report that's just come out that that says that only 15% of the SDG indicators which sit behind these are on track. None of the actual SDG goals are on track at all to be achieved by 2030. So we're in quite dire straits. And obviously we've had COVID-19, the cost of living crisis, conflicts, climate crisis, extreme weather events. All of these have set us back, but they're on renewed campaigns now. It's known now as the decade of action, to stop talking and start doing. So hopefully a key takeaway here is that you'll see you can actually start doing things quite quickly with the SDGs. So I mentioned the key is to look at really what you can do, where you can make a difference as a result of your resources, your skills, your industry, what impacts you have on people and planet as a business, because you can't tackle all of these things, so you can't possibly take on all 17. Well, you could if you're a massive corporate, but I can't imagine you could start there in the first case. So the main thing here is to think about what areas, which SDGs are you going to prioritize? But why would you do this? Why is this a good thing to do? And the business case, I think, for addressing the SDGs is the same as it would be for setting up any sustainability strategy. So you'll all be familiar with the benefits that having a proper sustainability strategy will bring you in terms of helping you mitigate risks for your business, finding commercial opportunities and new income streams, reducing costs and efficiency savings, attracting talent, particularly new generations that are coming up through, and also very crucially winning client work. So making sure that you are in line with what your clients or your customers are expecting of you from a sustainability perspective. But there are lots of different approaches out there. You could go away and just do it all on your own without using the SDGs, which is fine. But actually, to use the SDGs, what you're effectively doing is taking a tool where all of the work has been done for you. So this is an internationally recognized as one of the most credible approaches to addressing social and environmental issues. And most importantly, they're really, really flexible. So you can use them however you want to begin with. So if you don't actually come under any mandatory sustainability reporting, you can start small and use them in a way that works for you. I would just caution, however, that if you start using the SDGs, you can use them just as a sort of as a comms platform. So taking all your existing activities and slapping an SDG icon on there to sort of demonstrate that you're addressing the SDGs, actually, I think you might open yourself up to scrutiny. So I would definitely recommend you use the SDGs to help you actually shape your sustainability strategy and your goals. So what targets and commitments have you set yourself under your strategy? Use the SDGs to help you do that. As I don't think just getting away with slapping a few SDG icons nowadays is going to be that beneficial in terms of credibility for what you're doing. So how do you integrate the SDGs into your business? There is a tried and tested blueprint that the UN Global Compact provide. You can get all the resources off their website, and I'll share with you at the end of the slide just to signpost you to where to go to get this. But there is a process that you can take in order to do this. And you start by understanding the SDGs. So really getting to grips with what they might mean for your business. And then you want to define your priorities. So as I mentioned, you can't tackle all of them. What are the priority areas you need to think about? Once you've decided on your priorities, you need to set goals, objectives against those priority areas, those priority SDGs, and then you need to get going and integrate the work in order to achieve those goals. And finally, it's really important to report back and communicate your progress against your goals. And then once you've sort of got to a certain point, you will then want to maybe reassess and decide again to reassess your priorities. So I'll take you through some of these steps now, and I just want to caveat as well that this is very much my experience of doing this, and others may do this slightly differently, but using these steps, this is the sort of thing that I have done as I've grappled with the SDGs. So yeah, I'll take you through that. Next slide, please. So you really want to get under the skin of the SDGs. You can start with the targets that sit underneath them. There's 169 in total, and a really easy way to do this is to get on something like globalgoals.org. It's very user-friendly. They have also free resources with even sort of you can download all the SDG icons as well, so that's what I use. And so when you're looking at the goals and looking at the targets, you will start noticing that some of them are very obvious that businesses can act on some of those, but some of them just aren't relevant at all. And so you should just start with picking out key targets that you think are relevant to your business and your activities. So I've brought out some examples for SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. There's 12 targets in total for this one. I think they added a few extra ones a few years ago when they did a bit of an update. But a key aim is that companies create employment opportunities that actually create economic development and ensure that people who are in work are also able to lift themselves out of poverty. So just by way of an example, if you look at target 8.3, promote policies to support job creation and growing enterprises. So an example of an action that we take here at Kennedy's is to deliver cybersecurity workshops to SMEs, so micro and small businesses, to help them manage possible cybersecurity risks. And that's done on a pro bono basis. Another target I'll pull out is 8.6, promote youth employment, education and training. I think a lot of businesses already have lots of activities related to connecting young people to the world of work. So this is ensuring that young people are able to progress from education into the workplace, and that so businesses often focus on upskilling them with work-related skills while they're at school or at college. And so what can you do that might already address that target 8.6? And you'll see if you go through all of the goals, there are going to be loads of things that will spark the ideas of where you might already be doing things that align with the goals. I have one tip when you're starting out on this journey: as early as possible, form a group. It could be a network of SDG champions, it could be representatives to form a working group from all across your business, and get them on the journey as early as possible, so that you're not in your own bubble thinking this through. You are, unless you are a sole trader, you're potentially not going to see all of the opportunities and alignment where you might be able to sort of build on what you're already doing. So I suggest you pull out some YouTube videos that explain the SDGs. I did the same. Get everybody understanding the basics, and then start a working group to tackle this together. And it's really important to start understanding this. How you look at the goals is quite broad and varied, so you need as many eyes on it as possible. So next slide, please. So when you're talking about the SDGs, you talk a lot about impact. So what impact is the effect you have as a result of your operations, supply chain, policies, practices, that sort of thing. But we're not just talking about positive impacts, so the good outreach you might be doing, it's also the negative impacts as well. And not only is it the things you're doing already, but it's possible opportunities for future impacts. So just when I talk about impact, this is the sort of scope of what I mean there. And you have to look throughout your value chain. So the impacts across your entire business, your supply chain, with your clients, community, public policy and advocacy. You can see on those circles on the slide, this is actually a diagram that the UN Global Compact provide once you've signed up to the commitment of the 10 principles. And it's really getting you to realize that it's not just in your immediate operations that you can have an impact, but it's also out in your supply chain and so forth. So do think about the full scope of your value chain when you're doing this, when you're looking at your priorities. So what is material to your business? What is relevant to your business? How do you decide which SDGs are going to be your priorities? If you've got the resource, you could start by conducting a materiality assessment. We don't have time to go into that today, the methodology behind that. It's quite a significant exercise. And actually, if you are starting out and you're not necessarily under any CSRD requirements, you should actually just start quite simple. So it could be as simple as using your working group, your SDG champions, whatever it might be, to audit all of your activities and list what impact you're having on the SDGs. It could be as simple as taking a spreadsheet, everybody logging all the activities they can think about. You could then tag those activities against the primary SDG. You could add an impact rating. You could say whether it's negative or positive, existing or future, so that you can actually start building a heat map to see where your activities are most prominent against the SDGs. So which SDGs are really standing out. So this is okay to be quite rudimentary. This is not an exact science. And you can also follow up that first exercise with things like looking at which of those activities impact your financial performance. So if you're not, if you're having a negative impact somewhere, are you going to struggle to win client work? The carbon emissions is a really obvious one, where we're seeing our clients are saying you have to have science-based targets on your carbon emissions reduction targets, and if you don't, we may not want to work with you anymore. So actually highlighting some of those with sort of commercial considerations is a really good sort of filter to look at them. You can also think about doing a competitor analysis. So which of your peers have already started using the SDGs? Which ones are they looking at? You can use this as a differentiator from your peers as well. Look at your clients or your customers. If they have already used the SDGs as a framework, they will hopefully have this in their sort of literature, their reports, and you can see which of the SDGs they're most focused on. And it will also potentially help you align some activities and look at opportunities to collaborate and build relationships as well through SDG alignment. What do you get asked in tender documents? We have whole sections now on what are you doing around responsible business, sustainability, those sorts of things, and being able to demonstrate that we've used the SDGs to set our priorities shows a level of maturity. And then also you could conduct a staff survey. So which of these topics do you think are the most important ones that we should be focusing on? And that's usually a really good way to gather stakeholder views and make sure that you're aligned with what your people think you should be doing. So hopefully you'll emerge with maybe a handful of SDGs you want to focus on. And the next thing to do, if we can move to the next slide, is to set goals against those. I'm sharing with you on this slide an example of what we do at Kennedy's. And in 2020, before my time, the board worked with consultants to identify 5 priority areas for the firm, which you can see there, 3, 4, 10, 13 and 16. And it was really important to us that we were using SDGs to guide our strategy and objectives. And actually the goals we've set ourselves against those have been largely achieved. So you need to start thinking, where do you actually need to get to? What measurable goals can you set yourselves to get there? We're actually in the process at the moment of conducting a materiality assessment, which will help us reassess and redefine our priority areas. So that's going to be happening in the next 6 months. So hopefully we'll be able to share a refreshed update of our SDG priorities next year. So different businesses use them in different ways. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see there's an example that I've found from AXA. Literally, if you Google SDGs and then a company name, you should be able to find out if they've got something on the SDGs. So they do offer the flexibility no matter what industry you're in. And so when you are researching your peers, you can really understand how you might be able to set yourselves apart. And if you go on to the next slide, there's another example from Vodafone. So they talk about impacts against each of the SDGs and the things they're doing to address those. So it's really easy to find lots of examples out there depending on your industry. So that's the sort of the basics of the SDGs, but when you're setting goals now, there's a new expectation. And so if you could move to the next slide. The UN back in 2019 recognised that businesses weren't ambitious enough in setting their responsible business goals and addressing the SDGs. There was a slow pace of change, and so they realised they had to change mindsets on how the SDGs can be used for businesses to take action. And the problem has been the approach to goal setting, in that it doesn't necessarily, historically, it wasn't going to get us to where we needed to be. So this is a new standard in goal setting. It's something to be aware of. And the aim is to get businesses to transform how they operate so that they operate within our planetary boundaries and in a way that achieves the SDGs. So you can see on the slide, there's a sort of the from and the to. So very much going from this historical mindset of just, this is where I am, I need to be able to progress. Maybe if you take an example of reducing your waste, I know I can reduce my waste by 5% every year. So that's going to be my target. Actually, the SDG ambition approach says you need to go from how much you think you can reduce to where you need to be. So your target should actually be zero waste. So it's an absolute target rather than just an incremental in light of where you are now. I won't read through all of these, but I think another one just to emphasize is maybe how CSR was traditionally viewed, and you would just do business as you've always done, and then on the periphery you would have some philanthropic activities. Actually, goal setting should now really be rooted in how you can have an environmental and social impact through your operations. So how much can you change the way you do business, which also has a positive impact on the SDGs. So as we go on to then sort of, that's the mindset of the SDG ambition that the UN Global Compact brought out. And if we can go on to the next slide, they've also started publishing SDG ambition benchmarks. So these are the targets that they are saying that of all the things that businesses can do, if you're going to do anything, these are the targets that you should be setting for yourself and achieving in order to address the SDGs. They've figured out this is the most impactful way a business can engage with the SDGs. So most of them, I would imagine, are going to be things that you can engage with and you can do yourselves. Gender balance across all levels of leadership and management, 100% of employees earn a living wage, equal pay for work of equal value, which in the UK isn't as applicable because we have an Equal Pay Act, but zero instances of bribery. You can see the list. So these are trickling through. There might be more added, and so this is a great place to start. Once you've emerged with your priorities and you start saying, well, where do we need to get to? I would suggest you go and get the benchmarks as a really good place to see sort of how ambitious you need to be across some of these areas. And next slide, on Friday, brand new report got published by the UN Global Compact, which actually does so much of the work for you. In fact, this is probably one of the most useful documents I've ever seen. It only just got published on Friday, so I've not had a chance to really digest it that much. I've already shared it with my team to get them to start thinking about what we can do off the back of the report. And essentially, this is a stock take of, again, halfway through, but what businesses really need to do. And they've identified 10 key pathways that businesses should be engaging with in order to address the SDGs and get us to where we need to be in 2030. And what's really useful about this report is it basically says, these are the goals you should be setting. These are the activities you need to do to get there. These are the actions you should be taking. This is like the metrics, the KPIs that you can use to understand if you're getting there. So all of the work's been done for you. It's a brilliant report, and I would definitely recommend giving it a read. So we've talked about understanding the SDGs, defining your priorities, setting goals, and the next place then is to actually get on and do. So if we can move on to the next slide. This can be a lot of work. So the UN Global Compact has done as much of the work for you as possible. On the right, you can see a screenshot from one of the benchmarks, which helps you plan out what you're going to do and how you're going to measure your progress against those goals. But I've simplified it in the diagram on the left. So you set your goal in line with the SDG ambition. You then decide how you're going to do it. So you might have 3 separate work streams in order to help you achieve that goal. You set goals against each of those pathways, and then you also need to determine what data, what metrics are you going to use. So you can set up something quite simple to begin with, and then as you get into it, it's something that will develop over time. So that is definitely something that will require lots of people in your business to support you with. You'll probably find that you need someone from the IT team, you need somebody from HR if it's a people related one, you definitely need your facilities people. So again, another reason why having a working group to look at this is a really good idea. And so that's it for the sort of the process. And in terms of where to go to get going with all of this, if we can go to the next slide, this is really some of the reports and things that I've mentioned. I should get paid by the UN Global Compact. I want my commission for shouting very loudly about them. Obviously, I think most of these are free on their library. So start with the SDG Compass, that sets out the process. SDG Ambition, there's loads of information about how to set those goals. And then finally, that SDG Stocktake publication that came out on Friday really can help you make sure that your sustainability goals are aligned to the SDGs and you can identify exactly how you need to get there. That was a lot of information. Hopefully I shared enough practical tips. There's obviously so much more we could go into, so I'd be keen to hear if you have any questions that I can answer.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kate. That was extremely in-depth, and my personal favorite was actually the slide, I think 12, which talks about integrate, which explained that this might sound complicated, but actually it's quite simple when you break it down the way you describe it. So everyone, we have time for questions. We have a couple in already, but if you haven't had a chance, please type away. So Kate, if you wouldn't mind popping down the slides just so we can see Kate's face and my face. So hello everyone. So the first question that has come in is, Kate, what do you mean by activities? So when you discuss auditing your activities to discover where the biggest impacts are, what are those activities?
If you think about the diagram I showed looking at your value chain, you could start with your core operations, for example. So think about recruitment. When you're recruiting people, there's often a lot of businesses who think about having a sort of DE&I friendly recruitment policy, so that some companies, for example, have name blind recruitment, things like that. So just in the activity of recruitment, and whether there is a particular approach you take, that could have a negative impact, that could have a positive impact. In your recruitment activity, are you only seeing a particular gender come forward for roles? Have you got a female heavy or a male heavy organization? So that's one example. Another example could be in your heating and cooling of your building. So what activities have you got in place in order to minimize your environmental footprint? So think about your energy tariffs. You could think about how you engage employees. Maybe you have an annual campaign to get them to switch the lights off, or use or switch off screens or something like that. So if you think about all of your sort of day-to-day operations, there's going to be something there across all of this, and it can sometimes be, well, that's not really significant enough, that's fine, but think about if there is potential to do things that would support any sort of sustainability goals you might be putting into place. Then you think about the supply chain. So how do you engage suppliers? How do you onboard suppliers? What questionnaires do you ask them to answer for you? You do have an influence with suppliers. If you're saying, do you monitor your carbon emissions? Even just by asking that question, you're not necessarily saying we don't want to work with you, but you are just indicating that this is an important thing for you. So just including in that sort of list of activities, sort of how you work with suppliers is also another one. And then you can also think about the work you do, the products or services you deliver. How are you delivering those products or services? What do they look like? Are there opportunities to make a positive impact through those products or services? Is there anything that you can do to capture sort of good things that are already happening, or potentially bad things that happen as a result of your products or services? And then another activity could be in relation to your outreach, to your community work. So all of those really good things. An example is where we've been looking at some of the outreach projects we have with young people. I don't think historically there was necessarily we were using consistent social mobility indicators on how we're selecting candidates for those schemes, and so we realised that that's an activity that, if we look at the possible future impact we can have, we can work with more young people who are from the backgrounds we wouldn't ordinarily see coming through into the legal sector, for example. I hope that helps. I could literally talk about this forever, so I'm trying to keep it short.
I don't want you to, because we've got other questions. Thank you very much. I feel like I have a very easy job. Short question, and then you have loads to think through. So apologies, we have more. This is, I think, a really great question. So this question is saying, how does ESG, so for those who don't know, ESG is environment, social, and governance. It's a kind of acronym quite commonly used in this space. So how does the ESG strategy align with the SDG strategy? So the question is, how do these things come together?
You know what? I think everyone gets really caught up in the terminology now. So a lot of what I was doing when I first got here was trying to explain to people the difference between ESG, responsible business, sustainability. There are nuances, but actually when you're talking about your ESG strategy, it can mean different things to different businesses depending on your context. So ESG obviously was a term that originated back in the investment world, and it's really to help you assess the performance of a company beyond the financials. So what's the environment performance? It's to give investors reassurance that essentially you are going to be able to weather the storm. So it's a lot more about risk mitigation, whereas I think a lot of businesses use sustainability and responsible business as more of a general, we're not just going to mitigate our risk, we're also going to have a positive impact as well, and go beyond just sort of making sure that we're not going to fall foul of anything. And so when you come to sort of talking about your strategy, if you've got an ESG strategy, you're probably talking in the same language as your sustainability strategy or your responsible business strategy. And the SDGs are a tool to help you identify the objectives behind that strategy. So I would say if your strategy is to have a better impact on people and planet, use the SDGs to know exactly how you're going to do that.
Thank you. One question that's come in is, how do you measure and report the activities?
There's a lot more coming through now in terms of sustainability reporting, and there's new EU directives that are coming through that is making quite a splash amongst the big corporates, particularly who operate in the EU. There is a lot more that's happening around the standards that companies use in order to know what to disclose to demonstrate what they do in these areas. ISSB, there's a lot of changes around those standards and disclosures. So actually, rather than get caught up in all of this, a very simple thing to do would be to think about annually reporting sort of what you set out to do, how far you've got with that, and bring it to life with some case studies. It can be on your website, it can be as a PDF, share it with your stakeholders. As soon as you start publicly committing to things, it then holds you accountable to tell people how you're getting on with it. So reporting on your activities is really about saying what goals you've set and how far you are along with achieving those.
And I also think to add this, there's something about proportionality. So yes, you do want to report and you do want to measure, but if you're quite a small business and you're not in the limelight compared to some of the larger corporates, don't spend hours and hours digging in the weeds for minuscule data points. Measure what you can. It's
keep
better.
It simple. You don't need to tackle lots of things. Maybe just set yourself an environmental goal and a social goal, that are really relevant to your business and things that you want to crack on with, and keep it simple.
Thanks. This one I'll do as the last question. It's a slightly I can't say the word existential question. So this one is sustainable economic growth open to interpretation? And is this in conflict with planetary boundaries? So I guess, is growth as a whole is there such a thing as sustainable economic growth? Is really, I think, what it's asking.
Apparently there is. This is what the SDGs is trying to address. So if you look at the targets, there's a lot in there about how you can achieve sustainable economic growth. So this is really testing me on some of this now, and I don't have this to hand, but there's if we go back to SDG 8 as the example, there's a lot you can do to create meaningful employment by paying the living wage, and doing it in a way that lifts people out of poverty. And we all know the huge economic benefits that brings us in general to society. There's less corruption, there is more stable economy, and there is a lot around, is it SDG 9? I think infrastructure and innovation, which also looks at deploying innovation and technology to solve these problems and to make things more sustainable across how we operate as a society. So the SDGs actually target that whole sort of innovation and technology to help tackle these problems as well. That was a hard one.
Yeah, thank you very much.